Hey everyone, my name is Rose. Welcome to today's Sew Along. So we are making this dress right behind me. This is the finished version, and I'm going to walk you through all the sewing steps. Please see below also for our pattern details to find my Etsy site, and please let me know if you have any comments or questions. So let's start sewing. Step one for this dress is going to be sewing the center front seam. So I added the seam at the center front so we have a nice crisp V point. I have a pattern on my fabric, so I'm just making sure this aligns at the center front. The next step is going to be attaching the back pattern piece at the sides. So for now, we're just attaching the side pieces here. At the moment, we're just attaching the two sides and repeating the same process for the lining. We will not be sewing the shoulders. This will be done at a later stage. So now you're going to take this off to the sewing machine, attaching all these seams together and repeating the same process for the lining. Okay, I'm doing a little cheat move here. In my actual sewing pattern, I am not suggesting this. However, because you're watching here, you're going to know a little secret. I'm using some nice strong string here. This is kind of like cotton thread, or you can use like lanyard kind of a thing. I'm using this with a zigzag stitch on your shoulders, and then also I'm using this on the skirt. So what this does is, because this is a heavier fabric, it's going to help gather your gathers on the shoulders and on the skirt more easy. So I'm just doing that in. You can see this here. It's just right at the shoulder seams. So you're going to do that for your right and left side bodice. After you repeat these steps onto your back bodice, you're going to begin to align all of the seams. So you're aligning the center front seam, the side seams, and all along the armhole and neckline. So that next step is we're going to sew our lining right side together to our self right sides together. And then we're going to flip this inside out. After you aligned all of the pieces, our next step is going to sew. So you're going to sew the neckline. You're going to skip past the shoulder seam. You're going to go all the way through the armhole, and you're going to skip the back shoulder seam, and you're going to go all along the back neckline, all along the side. All right, so I like to start at the shoulder seam, so at the neckline. When you're at the center front, make sure you pivot your fabric, go all the way back up into the shoulder. So next step here, I'm working my way through the armhole. So armholes done, goes from the shoulder seam all the way into the back neck shoulder seam. Last step here is we're working our way along the sides. So starting from the center back piece, you're going to sew all the way down and go all the way to the center front side piece. Our next step is to trim down the seam allowance and add a little notches. So these notches on the curved portion of the seams really help when you're flipping the garment back inside out. This reduces bulk and it helps your garment lay nice and flat when reversed. Our next step here is going to be reversing the entire garment. So reaching through, grab the shoulder, flip inside out, and you're going to give it a nice hard press to make sure all the seams are nice and crisp. Our next step is going to be attaching the top ruffle to the front bodice. So the back bodice does not connect to the skirt at all. The only connection to the skirt is actually at the front. So we're going to find the center front of both the top ruffle and of the center front bodice. And then we're going to take our lining piece and also find the center of that. So what's going to happen is your right side of your bodice is going to be flush with the right side of your skirt. So you see the top ruffle is directly on my desk. My bodice is right on top of that, both right sides together. And then also my lining piece. This is like a tunnel that your fabric is going to go through to tie the skirt. That is right sides to the right side of our bodice lining. So I'm going down, I'm pinning everything here, and then you're going to put this on your sewing machine, run it all the way through end to end. So what I don't have pictured here is reducing the seam allowance on the back. So make sure you trim everything down. And what we're going to do now is we're adding an edge stitch or top stitch onto your lining portion. So we're going to catch the seam allowance of the ruffle. So this kind of keeps the lining towards the inside of the garment and helps prevent it from rolling outside. All right, guys, we're on to the next step. We're gonna fold our seam allowance underneath here. So right here, we're creating a tunnel for our strap. So I'm going along, I'm pinning all of this, starting from the center front, working my way off to both sides, and then I'm gonna take this off to the iron, give this a nice little press, and then run this through my sewing machine with an edge stitch. So edge stitching is just really sewing as close to the edge of your seam as possible. This is nice and neat and looks really nice and finished. And this is the next step. For here, I also did the same exact process to the back piece. So you're gonna have two of these on the back. You're going to flip this under, and then again, one more time, seam allowance gets flipped inside, going all along the seam, just giving that a nice pin so you can mark the tunnel placement. We're coming right back to that little kind of little cheat here. I'm using this cording again and a zigzag stitch to go all along the top edge of my bottom ruffle. So this is going to create those shirring lines again here. So I'm adding this all the way through. You can do this or you can add the double basting lines. Of my top portion of the skirt. This is just one half of the back portion. And I just want to give you like a little tip for adding the second tier, which has either the long basting lines or your really strong thread that you're going to pull and create like those really nice and even shirring lines. So what you're going to do is you're going to fold it in half. So I fold it in half here, and you're going to do the same for your top portion. So you have the half points with right sides together. You're going to add a little pin here. You're also going to pin the ends together. So you're going to notice that like super big gap between both points, and that's okay. So we're going to see half it. So you're kind of like matching those two pins. So the pin all the way on the left, all the way on the edge. So that's this. And then the pin in the center. And then this is your next center point. This is your next center point. And you're going to pin that. And you're going to kind of go around and half, quarter. So this is now the quarter, a quarter. And you're going to find that next half pin, just going along. This will, this is very important in this process because it helps to provide even shirring basting lines. So your shirring is dispersed quite evenly. A A little tip is at the end though, you do want to give yourself like a pin about 1 inch off to the side. This is kind of just allowing for just keeping seam allowance in mind. And also on the side seam, you're going to be adding a zipper. I'm sorry, you're adding a pocket on either side. So this is really important. You don't want your shirt all the way to the edge, because everything is going to be too bulky, and you really want your pocket to lay nice and flat. So this is a nice little tip. So I'm just going all the way from one side to the other, and you're going to have these like cute little dips that when you pull the thread, it's going to lay nice and flat on your piece. So I'm following this method, finding the center piece, adding a pin. I'm going all along the front and the back. So I'm adding the bottom tiers into the top tiers. As I go along, I kind of just double check to make everything sure that everything is even. And after that, I'm going to begin to pull on that string. So you're going to pull the string, guide all of the shirring all the way through the garment. After this is complete, I kind of just do like another little go through just to make sure that the shirring is all laying even and consistent. And then I take this off to my sewing machine. So we're going to repeat this process on the both back pieces as well as the front piece. After this is complete, we're going to bring this off to the sewing machine where you're going to sew the top ruffle to the bottom ruffle. So you can see here I'm guiding it through the sewing machine, and I'm also along the way fixing the shirring. So it has to lay nice and perfect. So I really am trying to adjust it so it lays and has nice even distribution. So you can see this is a little slower process. You see I pause, fix, sew, pause, fix, sew. Next up here, we will be attaching the pocket to the body. So right now I am matching the pocket right below the tunnel. So it should be stitched right below the tunnel. I'm putting right sides of my fabric together, adding a little pin all the way down. And then what you're going to end up doing is you're going to bring it off to your sewing machine, running a stitch through that, and then repeating for all sides. So step after this will be matching all of your pockets, your right sides together. And then we're going to sew all the way down the side seams so that you have functional pockets. Our next step will be attaching the pockets together. So I am pinning, I have like a marked placement on your pattern to show where to place the pockets. And I'm placing, there's 2 pins right below the tunnel. This is just to show that you're sewing down the skirt seam allowance before getting to the pockets. So you sew down and you're going to go all the way around the pocket, all the way around the bag and bottom, and then you're going to sew from the edge of the pocket, or like where it last beats the skirt, and then all the way down the hem. Already in the center back. I'm using an invisible zipper, but you can use whatever you have on hand, whether you want to make this like a lapped zipper, or, you know, just regular sew in. That is up to you. Next thing, so you're gonna see here that I'm starting to kind of create that little cover of the top of the zip over here with your lining. You know, your zipper goes all the way up, your teeth go up. But before we do that, you're gonna take your strap, take a little bobby pin, put it through it at the end, and you're gonna go all the way from the center back to the side seam. After you thread it all the way through the back waistband, you're going to tack your back string, words, you're gonna tap your back string all the way flush with your zipper, so that when you're pulling to secure it tightly around your waist, that that is nice and secure and it doesn't come undone. And then you're going to also clean finish the top edge of your zipper. Okay, so we're nearing the end of the garment. What we're going to do right now is finding obviously the center of your bodice, which we have a seam here, and finding the center of the waist strap. So that's the strap that's actually on the skirt portion, not on the center of the bodice itself. You're gonna add a tack here. In theory, we're gonna try this on, tie our bow, add a little tack on either side of the waist, on the front and also on the back, so that it kind of stays in place. So how you're getting in and out of the garment is actually through the center back zipper. What I love about this garment is obviously if you lose weight, if you gain weight, you can make little alterations by, you know, removing the tacking, adjusting the waist with the bows, and then retacking them in place. So after you find where you want your waist placement to actually be with your strap, you're going to turn back the seam allowance both on the inside and the outside, and then kind of tack this close. So I'm just turning it under, and you can run a slip stitch all the way through your garment. So now we're going to do that, just that, try it on, tack everything in place, finish the side seams, and then we're moving on to finishing the bodice itself. So still we need to do is sure and close the shoulder seams, close the center back, so we have that as well, and then finish the hem. Next step will be to joining the shoulder seams together. So what you're going to do is meeting the shoulders at each edge, so at the inside of the neckline and the outside of the shoulder seam. You will then begin to pull at the basting stitches to gather the basting stitches. After this, you will make sure all of them are evenly distributed, and you'll take this off to your sewing machine, sewing at your normal seam allowance. After this, I'm going to begin to tuck under my lining seam. So this part is going to be done by hand. So I'm tacking underneath the seam allowance on the lining and then just tacking that all the way through.